magazine, basically dismissing some of his enemies in Washington, which he does a great job of doing, while calling the far-right elements of the Republican Party a collection of clowns. Now, some of you might know this already, that Bannon, Steve Bannon, was the former executive chair of Breitbart. All right? It's kind of a far-right publication. He called a reporter with the magazine the American Prospect. Etho-nationalism, it's losers. It's a fringe element, Bannon said. I think that the media plays it up too much, and we got to help crush it. You know? Help crush it more. He added, these guys are a collection of clowns. Well, they might be a collection of clowns, but when you get national airtime and when you get TV time, which these white nationalists got, like it or not, they got national, worldwide time to further what their agenda is. And what it does is it clouds the waters for anybody that considers themselves to be conservative, Republican. Even if you're a moderate, they will, because you're a Republican, they'll put you in the extremist category. And that's just where it's at. It's frustrating for a lot of people to say, but that's not me. That's not in my heart. That's not the way that I am. But television and radio are very powerful tools. That's why it's so important for people to be able to do their due diligence. I mentioned yesterday that filmmaker, author Michael Moore, leftist Michael Moore, was on with CNN labeling all Trump supporters as rapists. I mean, really? Honest to goodness, we're rapists, we're pedophiles, we're this, I mean, if it wasn't already enough for the things that they were saying about the deplorables, if it wasn't enough, and there's a lot of us, by the way, a lot of deplorables in the United States, enough so to get a president elected. That's a lot. That's enough. That's enough. Just like a lot of folks did not say anything that they voted for Donald Trump because the climate that we're in right now, don't you think that a lot of folks now, when they're flying, when they're traveling, when they're out and about, do you think that they announce what their political affiliation is? If you're in business, probably not. That's always been a given, though. I mean, it's one of these things where, they say one thing when you're with family, when you're around the table, politics and religion, don't talk about them. In my house, I talk about both of them. But in select company, I am respectful because if I know that the other person does not agree, then I know not to go there. And I have this amazing, uncanny ability to be able to blend right in with the left if I need to. Yeah, because I can play it both ways because I learn the mindset. But it's so easy to pick up. Because if you play if you play the race card, the bigot card, all that stuff works well. But what Steve Bannon knows, okay, as a strategist, is that as long as the left plays this game, he says that the right will win. The conservative agenda will prevail if this is the only card that they play. And I agree with what he has to say. Now, a lot of people say that Donald Trump is distancing himself from him. Well, he's still in his job. He's still in his position. And a little write-up today on Fox News about this whole thing going back and forth with what Fox had learned of Bannon through this conversation was off the record, a scenario similar to Anthony Scaramucci's infamous interview with the New Yorker, which preceded his ouster as communications director. That's why people are thinking, well, now Bannon's given an interview with this leftist magazine, So, good riddance. He's going to be gone. Now, in this wide-ranging magazine interview, the content of which Fox News can confirm is what they're saying is accurate, Bannon also said that his adversaries within the state, defense, and treasury departments are wetting themselves as he works to push them out of the administration. Bannon said that he called the writer Robert Kuttner because the strategist argued with a recent article explaining how China would benefit from a nuclear threat between the U.S. and North Korea. So Bannon detailed his push to punish China with tougher trade sanctions and talked about plans to oust opponents of the move. So he's concentrating on economics. He says, I am changing out people of East Asian defense. I'm getting Hawks in. I'm getting Susan Thomas, acting head of East Asian and Pacific Affairs, out at state, the strategist said. Bannon's interview also covered North Korea. Despite Trump's claims of fire and fury against the regime, Bannon said there's no military solution to North Korea's nuclear threats. Forget it. Bannon has been the target of speculation across the country about his future in the Trump administration. The advisor reportedly has been increasingly isolated within the White House as new members join ranks. And the New York Times reported in this week that Bannon had not personally met with President Trump for over a week. So this is some of the thinking. This is some of the thoughts. What I like about what Steve Bannon says is the economics of America and cracking down on China. And he says focusing our attention on these things right now. And as we can strengthen the American economy, we can get more people back to work. We can get these folks out of office that are counterproductive to the Trump regime. We'll be in a much better place. What do you think about Steve Bannon's comments? A lot of people are not liking the comments about the clowns on the alt-right. Etho-nationalisms, it's losers, Bannon adds. It's a fringe element. I think it's more than just clowning around. I think it can be very dangerous, obviously. So just calling them a bunch of clowns, I think, is a little light, don't you think? Somebody died. Heather Heyer died. A lot of folks got injured. It's kind of a weak language. So we don't know if this guy has gone totally off the reservation. He's gone totally rogue or anything like that, but he's not a dummy. A lot of people are supposing the reason Trump hasn't fired him yet is because he might do more damage because of his connections in media on the way out and reveal what's really going on inside the White House. Sometimes it's good to keep, possible enemies that could be enemies closer to you, as you know the story goes. So I don't think he's a complete enemy, but it's, you're always going to have folks with ideas, and Trump knew what he was getting into, I think, with Bannon. But there's been a lot of cleaning of the house, and I guess Kelly will be the one to decide as chief of staff, so we'll have to find out here. So Bannon said that he had a solid plan for removing his enemies at the State and Defense Departments, telling Kuttner, he says, they're wetting themselves. I have to mention that again. Battle the trade doves inside the administration while building an outside coalition of trade hawks that include left-wing as well as right, he wrote. Working with both. Imagine that, a little bipartisan effort. Imagine that. Might be a little strategy there. There has to be some more synergy in Washington for things to get done legislatively, because if we can't get those things, we're not going to get anything done. I mean, there's, yelling and furious as people were with Barack Obama doing everything by executive order, which can be overturned, which Trump has overturned a lot of things, as you're aware of. But if things get passed in Congress, that's another story. Man, it would be nice to have a lot of these, the turmoil that's going on in the White House. I mean, this could be a make or break for this president. I mean, it's not off to a very good start here by any stretch of the imagination. It's been turbulent, and I've said from day one that it was going to be very difficult because we weren't quite sure how people were going to navigate around Donald Trump. I call him a beautiful disaster. I like Donald Trump. I think he has some awesome ideas for a country. I like that he's not a politician. What I side on for folks that are critical of Donald Trump is that he is the president. And he needs to start, I guess, acting more presidential. A little different tone to his voice when he comes to the microphone. Maybe he needs to work with George Clooney. And the reason I say that, and I don't think George Clooney would ever work with Donald Trump, but who knows? He worked with Barack Obama for his stature and the way he carried himself, body language, etc. He did. Gave him tips. A lot of the left gave him tips, and he was a fine speaker, but he went to school. He got polished. He's terrific. He's absolutely terrific everywhere he goes. He really has that game going on. Trump is just not as smooth, and it'd be nice to see him, I don't know, more tenderness. I don't know, something, but I don't know if Trump will ever have that. There's been some conversation, and I was thinking this the other day, which was kind of an interesting thing. The gentleman who was writing the book, or wrote the book back in the 80s with Donald Trump, and I have this news story in another pile that I was going to talk about the second hour, but since this actually goes perfectly together, I'm going to go ahead and just dig this thing out, because I think he had a interesting thought. And because of all the stuff that's going on and all the fighting and just all the crap, and there's a lot of good things that are happening in the midst of all of these firestorms that Trump finds himself in. But my thought was that I wonder if Trump has not had a thought or two because of all the stuff that's going on here and all the hate and all the fighting and just all the Washington gridlock, where he's just like, you know what? Hey, Mike, you want the job? You can be the president and just resign. Now, I don't subscribe to all the thinking in this next story, but I have to shed some light on it because it pretty much intertwines with some of my thinking. The Art of the Deal, the co-author, Tony Schwartz, he's predicting that Trump is about to resign. Now, I know that's music to some people's ears that don't like Donald Trump, but he's predicting that the president is getting ready to call it quits and that the resignation will happen soon. He wrote this on Twitter, so you can find it. Tony Schwartz, check it out. He's predicting it. He's thinking it. He says, I surely believe that at some point over the next period of time, he's going to have to figure out a way to resign, Schwartz was telling CNN at the time. Despite authoring a book with Trump, Schwartz advised the campaign of 2016 Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton for free. He advised her. He says, this is my penance for having created a man who has become a monster. He said in September, I have spent 30 years feeling bad about it. Schwartz also said that he would donate his share of the profits of Art of the Deal to the National Immigration Law Center, an organization that helps low-income immigrants. All right, so we can see where he's going with this. However, for people that I know that know Trump, really know him, that have worked with him, Trump ain't going anywhere. And what he alludes more specifically with CNN and his Twitter rants, Schwartz, and he profited immensely from the Art of the Deal and still does. He's complaining, wow, I made him. You don't think that Donald Trump would have published the Art of the Deal without him? Somebody else would have published it. It pushed him over the top. Are you kidding me? It sold hundreds of millions of copies. It's amazing how people say, oh, yeah, for 30 years this has bothered me because I've created a monster.